Right, and we're live, hopefully.
Awesome.
So, do you guys just want to introduce yourselves just while I'm testing to see if it is actually going live?
Do you want to go first?
Okay, yeah, we didn't just. Oh, whatever. Hello, I'm Brian. To the many thousands and millions of people who are watching this.
Hi, I'm George. Uh, I guess we should probably state political leanings at the beginning. I'm I'm a little bit to the left of centre.
I'm probably about as centrist as you can get, but I'm quite unsure. I vary
And
wildly on different issues.
I'm Stephen, and I'm right of centre.
Yeah, so we've got the whole spectrum covered here, almost.
We
What
are
about
we are missing two people out today. They were unable to make this.
Yeah,
Um, what they So we have Roxanne, who will hopefully be joining us another point, and also Tom. And hopefully they will be joining us next time for that.
yep,
The idea for this was to have a platform where we can talk about the latest COVID-19 updates, considering so we're all A-level students, and due to the government's announcement a few weeks ago, our exams have been cancelled. So we thought we'll use the skills and like interpersonal skills we've built up along this time, and try and put some education out there on many different issues. Um, our plan for today is to talk about the what's been happening up till now with COVID-19, and hopefully the plan for future episodes will be we'll talk about the latest developments, and then we'll go on to other stories that have maybe been buried by how prominent COVID-19 is in the news currently.
yep.
I think that covers it all.
Yeah, I think it does. So, what do we want to start with? Do we want to start with education first, given that that's probably something that affects us most?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So education is really well, it's sort of gone. It's sort of all gone up in flames at the minute, hasn't it? It's very difficult to really know what's going on because I find there's been a bit of a lack of clear communication from not just the government, but like the government institutions like Ofqual, of what's really going on with our sort of A levels and how we're going to be marked for our grades, um, which is really frustrating because we quite like to know because then we'll know where we stand in terms of relation with uni offers, how what work and how much work we need to put in over the next few months. I don't know about you guys, but I've just sort of been bombarded with teachers sort of emailing me loads of work, going, "You need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this," without them even knowing whether or not it's gonna matter in the end. I don't know about if that's happened to you guys or not.
I mean, yeah. It's interesting because, of course, the government have been saying, "Oh yeah, try and do things along the lines of online lessons and things like that." But it's actually only one of my classes has actually decided to do that, and the other ones have left it to the students to make their own scheme of work.
Yeah, none of my classes have decided to do online lessons, which is I think it's probably for the best because I think online lessons are they can't really replace the classroom in terms of what you get out of it.
Mm.
Um, I'm just bringing up Ofqual's website, and they say that they will outline by Easter the process which they will follow to make sure grades are fair across schools and colleges, as well as our proposals for appeals. Uh, Obviously, it is Easter holidays at the minute, um, so hopefully we'll hear in a couple of weeks what Ofqual think they're going to do about grading, and then that has a big knock-on effect to students getting into university. And I don't know about you guys, but it's very problematic to try and plan sort of what your first, second choice is going to be for uni if you don't know what the grades are, and especially if they haven't given you an offer yet because of everything that's going on, because most of them are shut down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking to go to uni. I'm taking a gap year first, But something that I decided to do is I'm not going to apply and defer. I'm just going to apply after this is done. So I have no idea how that's going to work. They haven't announced what actually happens yet. Like, do
Yeah.
you get a certificate, like almost like a get out of jail free card, or what? It's very tricky area.
From my reading of it, they said that the grades they award this year will be identical to previous years, but it's not like people aren't in the future going to have heard of COVID-19.
Yeah.
They're going to know that you were the year that didn't sit exams. And
Yeah.
I say this as a year 12, so I'm meant to be learning new content all the way through to June and July. But
Yeah, that is true. Year 12s, I think, are going to be really hard hit unless the government comes up with some kind of compensation in the year 12 exams for when they're in year 13, to sort of go, well, we realise that this crisis has hit them as well as these current year 13s, but you can't cancel exams for 2 years, especially if
Yeah.
it isn't a health crisis.
it's across the board. It just depends on how good your school is. Like, I'm being sent work, like detailed, like lesson planned work for my subjects from all of last week. So we're doing well, but I know definitely not all schools are doing that. Lots of people are just playing Fortnite because there's so many distractions.
Yeah, that is true. I think it's very problematic to sort of take the exams, the year 12 to take the exams, and then for them to go, well, it's fair because everyone had the same thing. Because I think it's like, well, no, not everyone has the same thing, especially with some people's home environments can be very, very different. So they can have, far more distractions that mean they succeed far less than those who have a sort of better quality in their home life.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting as well because you have the disparity between people who decided that who maybe work better in exams but not in like assessments and assignments, and then you have it the other way around. So people who do better in assignments than exams, and
Yeah.
that's really affecting some people. They're not sure whether they can. The year 12s actually I find more because they're not sure if they're going through to the second year of education, or whether they're going to have to resit things because they don't have the opportunity to sit that exam.
Yeah, I think what has to happen is they have to go through to the second year of education. I think they can't just go, oh well, because you were getting, because you got a U on your mocks, you're not going to be able to, progress through. Because if it's a subject they've chosen, they want to do it, and so you're sort of denying them that effort, because a lot of people don't take mocks seriously.
Yeah.
And then once they get their mock results, they go, okay, I'm going to actually have to put in a lot more effort than I thought I'd have to, and therefore get far better grades in the actual exams. And you can't simulate proper exams like you can, like mocks. They're good for just sort of getting you used to how it feels to be in an exam hall, but you can't simulate the sort of stress that you're under.
Yeah.
When it comes to proper exams.
And all of this disruption is going to have a knock-on effect in the longer term. Like, even if it might be optimistic to say by September everything is up and running again, or it's just getting up and running, people are going to be behind not just a week or two of content because they were ill, but some people are going to be behind like an entire term's of worth of content at year 12, which means when we're in year 13, they have to do all of year 13's content and catch it up. And at uni, some people, they need to spend the first year redoing A-level content.
Yeah, I think it's very problematic. And then you mentioned unis. I think the one thing that I've been really quite appalled by is I think unis are still students are still paying tuition for the third term, which they haven't even been taught. I think a lot of uni students, especially with lecturer strikes that have been going on over the course of the uni year, they haven't had like a prolonged period where they've just had their lectures, because there's been lecture strikes and then you've had COVID-19, and so the people in uni are really, really missing out on a lot of the education that they have actually paid for.
Yeah.
I think I don't know whether a government can step in and say, look, we, either I'm not sure they can step in and say, look, we'll pay for this, but it's definitely something that they've got to look at, because for a lot of students who are like really not well off at all, it's going to be uh, a big waste of money, to be honest.
But then with next year, the speculation is, will all of the international students come back in September? That if you don't get new first-year international students, the unis won't be in a position to give money back to domestic students because they won't have it. Some unis, the big top Russell Group universities, are hugely dependent on international students to pay for their buildings, their staff.
Yeah. It's a really tricky one, because when people went into the uni, they were promised, look, you'll get 3 terms taught, you'll get your grades and assessments at the end of it, and well done. But it's really disrupted people's sort of education in that way, and I feel really bad for the sort of final year students who don't know if they're going to get any qualifications for the years they've been at uni, and who have paid all that money to then maybe get no qualification. And if they don't get qualification, they're going to have to retake that final year, and then you have basically 2 final years of the people who are moving through into final year and the final year you have to retake, doing it at the same time, which would be massive amounts of people.
Yeah.
Like nurses have to do a clinic, haven't finished yet, and have to do another clinical placement, of which most have all been cancelled, which is a requirement to graduate.
In that regard, actually. I know one of the sisters up at Bristol Hospital, and she says that actually the third year medical students and nursing students are actually already being drafted in. They're getting their pins early, so they're getting a free graduation almost from it.
But if they don't take up the offer to work in the NHS in hard working conditions, they can't graduate, because it's a requirement to do this what would normally be a safe placement. They have to go and work on a coronavirus ward to graduate this year.
Yeah, especially if some of those people have underlying conditions, it's really difficult for them to sort of, get to grips with what's going on, because if they have an underlying condition and they get, COVID-19, that's possibly fatal for them, and that is then, it's not just their life that's lost, which is tragic. It's also then a nurse for the NHS for years to come that is lost.
They're not being well treated by they are being drafted up like the military and forced into service, because on a widespread scale that's what it may be needed, but on an individual basis it's not pleasant.
It definitely is something that it really needs to be looked at closely, because it's sort of like it's all good going out your front door and clapping for the staff who are basically the backbone of this country at the minute. But if you can't protect your staff properly, then it's only a matter of time before they start saying, look, we can't do this job because you're not giving us the tools to do so. Which is one of the things recently is they're saying there just isn't enough personal protection equipment for NHS workers.
Yeah, that's unacceptable. But it's in a time like this, everyone in the world is trying to buy PPE. You can't import it from abroad because they're buying it.
I believe it's France actually have announced that they're seizing any and all equipment that they come across like that. There was a UK supply lorry that was seized a few days ago, I believe, carrying face masks, and the French government went, nah, this is ours now.
Which is, I think it was Spain, whereas in the UK, the NHS did a deal with private hospitals. I think in Spain they just ordered to take over private hospitals and use them to help the national state hospitals, which is a very draconian measure.
Yeah, I know.
It's a very bold move. I feel like it's something that almost at this point has to be done, because as soon as you start, it's sort of, disaster capitalism. As soon as you have a private health service, when the national one can't handle it, you're either going to have the people who are rich enough to pay for it, paying for it and able to get far better quality of service, or you're going to get people who feel like they have to pay for it and will use all the money they possibly can to pay for it in order to sort of stay alive in this sort of life and death situation. I think it's wrong to be sort of charging money to say, look, we could actually possibly save your life, but it's going to be a big fee.
So yeah.
Oh.
So there's a article in the BBC which was published yesterday, which says that UK clothes makers says the government has wasted time in ordering personal protection equipment for the NHS staff, and they said that they believe they could have begun making gowns and masks for frontline workers 10 days ago, which is if that is the case, then it's scandalous that they haven't been able to provide the NHS with the right equipment that they need.
Yeah.
I feel that the government may have botched the early response. Definitely the very early response from the UK government was very weak and nothing like what other countries around the world were doing.
Yeah. I think
about.
that's Hi, Tom.
Hi guys, all right.
Hey Tom.
Sorry
Hello,
I was so late.
That's fine.
That's okay. Yeah, everyone. This is Tom. He's the another member of the group. Tom, we're just discussing the shortage of personal protection equipment for NHS staff at the minute.
Oh, cool. Okay, nice. Sounds good.
Yeah. So we're saying that we think the government's response to the crisis has been quite slow when you compare it to some other countries, and that we think that I think personally from here on out they need to sort of up the rate at which they react to some of the sort of new data that's coming in.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair point. It does seem like we have been outliers to a certain extent in the speed of reaction.
Yeah. I think it's interesting though to look at the extreme of what we try to do, and we're looking at America in that instance. America tried to follow a very similar pattern to what we started to do and continue through it. And we can see how devastating that already is, with them already reaching 100,000 cases.
Yeah, I think they now have the most cases in any country in the world, which is I mean, Donald Trump. I'm not sure he has a structured plan. I'm not sure he had as much of a structured plan as Johnson and, well, not really Johnson, more Cummings of herd immunity. I think that
Did you see in the US that Donald Trump shut down the pandemic response team that was established by Obama?
Oh my goodness.
He did that like last year. So yes, they may have been prepared in the past, but their current level of preparedness as a country is woeful.
I must say, I've been very pleased to be hearing about the New York. I can't remember what his title is.
Governor.
Governor, that's the one. The governor of New York. He's doing an incredible job over there currently, I think.
He seems to be getting a lot of really good coverage. Yeah, he seems to be doing a pretty good job.
Yeah, he's been. I've seen him on the news once, and I think most of the time he was just saying that there just hasn't been enough done by central government in order to allow states to sort of take control of the situation, especially in New York, where the sort of hub of the infections are.
Yeah.
Well, it mirrors like in the UK that things for London might have to be done differently than the rest of the country, because at the moment London is further along than we are down here in the southwest with higher number of cases.
Yeah.
That is true.
Well,
Although
the
I
Southwest did
think
have a few of the original cases in the UK. The Southwest did start to get some of the first
Yeah.
deaths were at. I know there's been deaths at Bristol University and places like that.
Yeah.
So there is definitely a large presence down here in the Southwest. I think that's almost been overtaken now by London, but it was actually quite prevalent at the start.
Yeah, we had high at the start, but the rate it spread in London because of
Oh yeah.
transport and whatever
Yeah.
is.
it's just it's so difficult to make sure that people don't come into contact with each other in London, because London is just so densely populated. It's almost impossible to sort of make people stay, in a confined space, because their houses are often quite small, because London housing prices uh, are very high compared to a lot of the country.
Yeah, certainly. So it's just kind of thing. I've had some news stories just kind of popping up on over here. It's interesting to know the Israeli government, the Prime Minister, have now all placed themselves into self-isolation.
Is that Benjamin Netanyahu?
Yeah, it is. Apparently, one of his aides tested positive, and so they've all decided to self-isolate.
Oh dear.
We also have the Spain minister one of the ministers in Spain has actually said that the infection rate has now fallen.
That's good.
Which seems promising. They're starting their 4th week in lockdown, I believe. Is it?
Yeah.
Oh.
And they're not even allowed out to exercise.
Yeah.
I have a friend in Spain who was in the UK but went back to Spain before we went into lockdown, and
Yeah.
it's tough not being able to go walk your dog.
Yeah, or children.
Yeah.
It's those people with children I actually think are more of a issue in those regards. If you live in a block of flats and you can't go out, you have a 3-year-old or whatever. It's not going to.
It really isn't fantastic for those who with sort of small children, because everyone's being told, oh, you can work from home, but if you can't just work from home if you have small children, because often small children left with one parent goes out to work, comes back. It's very difficult for both to be at home, one to work, one to look after the kid, because you want to spend time with your children. If you're at home, they want to spend time with you. So I think it's
prime examples of that. When I was in one of my online lessons, the teacher's kids came into class. And, it just disrupted the whole thing, and he just kind of had to have. Yeah, he has 2 small kids, and they were one on each of his lap, on each of his legs.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I think that's once again affecting the kind of the education side of it as well, because the teachers aren't able to do it because they're partly worrying, oh, what's my kid doing? What's my kid doing?
Yeah. It's really problematic to sort of know what to do with people, because you can keep people apart, but then what do people do in order when they're apart, especially when they're told work from home unless you're an essential worker. What counts as an essential worker? We haven't really had, I don't think, enough clarification from central government from that. But just going back to sort of the NHS, on the Guardian website at the minute, and they say they have live reporting, and they're saying that the UK 1 in 4 NHS doctors are off sick or isolating at the minute.
Wow.
Which I think shows the lack of sort of protection that they're getting, if 1 in 4 of them are not able to come into work because they're showing symptoms of the disease, which is it's really not good. And drafting in, I think they said we're talking about the third year medical students and nurses who are being drafted in, but you also have 20,000 retired doctors and nurses being put on the front line again. I think it's really With the lack of that equipment, you can sort of replace them with retired doctors and nurses, but they're also eventually going to have to leave the service again because they're probably they're at risk individuals, especially if they're over the age of retirement and they're having to come back into the service.
But from the government's perspective, what do? They're also trying to get cabin crew to man the hospital, the new Nightingale Hospital in the Excel Centre in London, because they're all first aid trained, and if that's the only requirement to work on the front line now, then
Yeah, it really is a problematic one because you're gonna have you've got to have people to look after people with the worst symptoms, but some people will still come in with mild symptoms, going, what can you do for me? I've got it, because I think there's been, because of all the news coverage and how big it's become, a lot of people are now really scared of of getting it, and I think they're just scared of like seeing other people in general, because they're like, oh no, what if I get it? And I think what a lot of people have to sort of get to grips with, especially if they're younger, is it. Although it may, if you have an underlying health condition, it may be problematic for you. But if you're sort of healthy, below the age they think is at risk, that it's very unlikely that you're going to die from the disease, but you're more likely to be a carrier of it than you are to die of it. And so staying at home is the best option you have to not put the NHS under a lot of stress unless you're just displaying severe symptoms.
Yeah. I think it's going to be interesting because everyone's as well talking about, when we can return back to everyday life and things like that. But I was talking to someone the other day, and they were saying that they can't imagine now walking up to someone and hugging them.
Yeah.
It's going to be a long it's going to be a long time before people actually feel comfortable doing things like that again. Especially if they're saying that social distancing measures and things like that are likely to be in for another 6 months.
Yeah, and you don't know how long of that is going to be lockdown because the government said they haven't planned how long they're having the lockdown for. That's why they've got 3 week sort of updates to see if they want to extend it or whether or not they want to, take the measures back. But then the problem is, if the curve starts to slow and then you remove the measures, if people then ignore social distancing measures, like was seen, in the London with the tube when before the lockdown, where you sort of had people packed in together, the government will have no other option other than to, bring the lockdown back if they see a spike in cases after that.
Certainly, yeah. I think it's going to be interesting to see how much people start. I think after this, people are probably going to get more used to social distancing as well. It'll be more weird to kind of be going back to seeing people, going out and I'm going to go see people, I'm going to go down to the pub or something like that. That's going to be something that isn't going to be as ingrained in people.
I disagree. The moment these restrictions are lifted, people are going to go and sit and try and meet as many people as they can, which is why the restrictions might have to last longer than they would otherwise, because plenty of people I know, the first thing when they say, you can leave your house a bit more than you used to, we're just going to ease it off, they're going to go meet up in groups of 50 people every day.
Yeah.
I can't blame them. That's when the government says it's okay to see people, they're going to see people. But
yeah, it's a natural response to go, oh well, I mean, there isn't rules against it, so I should be doing it. It's like, no, just because there isn't rules against it at the minute, you should still be careful with what you're doing. But it's really problematic to sort of know how long these strict measures need to be in place, and because you can try and sort of ease people off of it, but even when you're easing people off of it, people are going to push it right to the extent of, we're going up to the law where it is, and we're going to go no further, but we're not going to take any more measure. We're going there, and that's it. Because I think that also comes down to, especially with jobs, it comes down to sort of, if you have someone on a 0 hours contract, and their choice is whether they stay home and social distance or whether they go into work and get paid, it's a really problematic decision. I think if you take it to that line rather than sort of socializing, because I think a lot of
Yeah.
people will go out and socialize once the measures are lifted, and so that's what I think they should start putting people back into work first, gradually, before releasing restrictions on pubs, parks, because as soon as you lift those restrictions, people have free time. They've been inside, for however long the lockdown will have lasted. They're going to see, oh great, we're allowed to go out again. I haven't got work. I'm going to go out.
Yeah.
I think now as we've set out, we're going to be in lockdown for a long time. Now would be the time to transition to how are we going to cope being stuck indoors,
Yeah.
and the whole mental health aspect of it. As
Yeah.
Yeah.
what are your thoughts on that?
I mean,
I
it's
think-
interesting. I'm already talking to people who are struggling with being inside currently. It's maybe they're stuck inside with family members or something like that who they don't get on with, or there are many. I've heard of far more home arguments and things like that recently, due to what's been going on. And I know of people who they were planning on moving out because of disagreements with their parents just before lockdown came in, and now they're not. And there's some really serious concerns, I think, that people need to be thinking about on this, due to physical and mental health.
Definitely, I think it's been really sort of eye-opening, almost to the sort of extent that people feel unhappy, sort of in their own lives, in their families, just because they can't really escape from it anymore. And I think that it's sort of a real problem, I think, in society, that people feel so unhappy to the extent that they want to move out to sort of get away from it. And I feel like there needs to be far more support for young people in sort of parents' homes, whether those parents are verbally, physically abusive, or just to the extent where you don't want to go out of your room because you don't want to see the people that you're in your house with. I think there needs to be far more support for people in those circumstances. One thing that I was reading, which was really interesting, and there was a debate on Twitter about it, was I think it was the Mermaids, a transgender charity. I think it's but basically they have a button on their website so that if kids, or not kids but like teenagers, like 13 to 18-year-olds are looking at their website for support, they had a button which they could press if their parents came in the room to take them away from the website. And there was a big debate on Twitter and on the internet around whether or not that was a safeguarding issue or not, because a lot of people were like, well, kids shouldn't be hiding things from their parents because
Ooh.
But it's also like, if your parent is really transphobic, you do not want them sort of invading your sort of, well, it's almost your own private business, even though you could be young, you're not quite 18, but it's your life, it's your private business, and you're trying to sort of look at what how I'm not the best to talk about this, because I feel like none of us are really that qualified to talk about this, but it's very strange to me that people would have a problem with sort of teenagers hiding that from their parents, especially when it isn't a sort of widely accepted thing in society yet.
Yeah, certainly.
Do you have any input, Tom?
I don't think I've got anything particularly insightful to add on top of that, to be honest. I do think it is a bit of an issue, particularly I think the way the media has sort of portrayed the whole thing with sort of exams being cancelled and all the kids or hey, freedom, all the rest of it. But actually, I think for so many kids, even the ones who explicitly hate college, can't wait to get out of it. But as soon as it's cut early like this, the lack of structure is so like it really people really miss it when it's not there, and that has such a massive knock-on effect in terms of everything else. And so I do think people need to start to see things a little bit from the perspective that maybe exams being cancelled and college being closed, schools being closed is not a great thing for kids, and actually a lot of people are really sort of being negatively affected by it, partly because of the way in which it then kind of forces a period of quite intense sort of isolation with what can be some sort of difficult or in a difficult sort of situation.
Yeah, I think it's really difficult when people don't have structure, because it's very uncertain, and people do not like uncertainty in their lives. I feel like it's one thing, it's just a cause of anxiety, and as soon as it's sort of removed, the sort of structure, the certainty, people get really, really quite scared, which is what we have at the minute, and that's what is sort of, I think, failing to be dealt with when we're talking about this sort of issue.
On the flip side, though, I've been seeing posts from people that I know who have anxiety, but their anxiety is actually about being expected to go out, and actually that their anxiety is better than it has been in years. Now there's no obligation to be going out. I just think, yes, there are probably more people who are having issues, maybe mentally or something like that, because of it. But there is also a flip side and almost a positive aspect to some of it as well, on the mental health.
Yeah, I feel like there can be that, but I think what that then is a sort of, I think it's a failure in terms of structure of the pressures that are put on people, rather than sort of, because you're not. Anxiety isn't something that necessarily, I think, has to happen. I think it happens because of pressures put on you through society, and I think because those pressures have been alleviated for those people, they've just been sort of shifted to elsewhere. And I think what really needs to happen is that pressure needs to be sort of lifted from everyone in respect, which is sort of like in a way, what you need is, you sort of have, societal norms, and I think that needs to sort of, it's something that, you sort of have, we're normal, you're strange, therefore we're going to sort of, we're putting you out because you're different to us. And I think it's something that's sort of, it's not brilliant for society if you're sort of dividing it up into chunks of, you're, a socializer, you're an introvert, you're an extrovert, you're in this category, you're in this category. I think it can get very sort of problematic for people. It's sort of when people come together and sort of go, well, no one's in any category. People should just be able to, do what makes them comfortable. There shouldn't be any pressure on people to do things that they're not comfortable with.
Yeah, certainly.
Well said. Yeah.
Yeah.
It shouldn't require, I don't think it needs to go without saying that it shouldn't require a global pandemic to change our approaches to many things, but this may act as a catalyst for change, or it may not. I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I think the potential positives, it's kind of weird to think of positives coming out of this sort of crisis, but I think it's an interesting kind of thing to think about in terms of things like you guys have just mentioned, and then other things like, I bet there's going to be a massive drop in emissions when we sort of look back over this period of time,
We can
and just
see
in terms of how we
many
work.
places.
Yeah, there's been a massive drop in emissions across Europe especially, and in China there's been a huge drop in emissions now that people aren't traveling to work every day using cars. It's because it's like, we all talk about, we want to return to normal, we just want to get back to normal, but it's almost like, well, if you look at some of the things that come out of this, which is, people don't, a lot of people don't need to travel to work, because we've seen that they can do it remotely. A lot of people, if then you reduce the number of people using cars, you can then invest. If you invest infrastructure of trains, electric cars, even, which the government has committed to stopping the sale of. I think it's anything other than electric cars by 2050. But if you can just reduce the amount of people that are just traveling, you then can start reducing emissions, and this surely it's something that you can sort of build from here, because from here you've got really no one really traveling unless they're essential worker like NHS, they work in a supermarket. And so it's sort of like we're all like, oh, we just want it to return to normal, but it's like, well, if you just look at what we're doing now, yes, it's bad, but if you just take some of the positive aspects from it and think, well, maybe we don't need to return to normal, because maybe we just need to move forward rather than sort of go back.
Yeah, definitely. I think, yeah, if we kind of take the best bits from what we've learned from this kind of experience and take the sort of necessities from before, I think altogether it could, in the sort of long term, become a more positive thing. Obviously, the economic kind of issues that are likely to result from this could undermine any short-term benefits are made. But I think also a similar sort of argument could be made with the education system, in that now we've got no exams and we're kind of then starting from scratch, so to speak, sort of next year. It does give a brief sort of window where we could maybe consider this sort of exam system and how it's so sort of high pressure, and whether there are ways of using teachers' opinions a little bit more when it comes to formulating grades and things which aren't just exam based.
Yeah,
Or moving to a where you apply once you have your qualification, like Stephen is doing with taking a gap year. If it's not a gap year, but there's a period and it's normal that everyone gets their A levels and then applies, you have complete certainty in where what unis you should look at and what you shouldn't.
Yeah.
I think that is definitely a very interesting idea to sort of, because it's very problematic, because imagine you're a student who's predicted A star, you're applying for Oxford, Cambridge, and you have like an absolute meltdown in the exam because of the amount of stress. You just see one question, it just goes blank, and then you're like, my goodness, what am I going to do? It's the first thing that you can then do with that is, if you had teacher input, that could then go, well, they're just not very good at exams, but their work, his examples of their work in class, it's been consistently really good. That can bump their grade up. But then also, if you introduce the sort of applying after you get your grades, you then won't waste any of your options on things that you apply for in sort of best case, worst case scenario. You can then pick the ones where you're like, okay, I really want to go to that, I have grades to go to that, I'll pick that one. And then, but there's also some students who sort of think, oh, I'm never going to get those grades, I'm never going to be able to go to that, even though I'd really like to. And then they come back and they've actually got the grades to get in, but they didn't apply for it because they were like, well, I want to make sure that I get into a university.
Yeah.
So it's definitely something that I think could be looked at.
Yeah. I think for me the other thing is that I've been saying for years that there should be an alternative for people who can't handle exam situations. Those who maybe have anxiety or something like that. They can't do exams like that, but they're forced into a situation where they have to.
Well, for me, I do 2 BTEC subjects, which is there isn't exams in my 2 BTEC subjects. It's all coursework, and it's far less stressful. Sort of, you go through the course of 2 years, and each sort of bit of work you do contributes towards your grade for that unit, and then that unit grade contributes towards the grade you get overall, and it's far less stressful. And you can spread the work out across the 2 years rather than into 3 exam papers. And it's a far smoother, and I feel like I learn a lot more sort of just transitioning smoothly between those and picking up the skills you need in those subjects without sort of going, okay, so what I need to do is make fantastic notes, and then I need to cram all of this stuff within 1 week, write it all down in the exam, and then I can forget it all. I feel like you're far more likely to retain the knowledge if you sort of go through the 2 years, and then that accumulates towards your grade.
Yeah.
That's definitely.
So I think more subjects like that. I think more options like that for people who aren't entirely sure. You know, if they're good at exams, then they can take, you know, exam subjects if that's what they want to do. But I feel like there needs to be far more options for people, sort of, you know, who want to take A levels or, you know, A level equivalents, but do not do well in exams. I feel like that then allows more people to access a better standard of education.
Yeah.
But qualifications that are well understood, because there are lots of qualifications, but
Yeah,
could you name them all? Or
yeah,
they need to be recognised, because they might be said to be equivalent, but if
yeah,
you're a
definitely.
employer and they come to you with a qualification you've never heard of,
Yeah, I think
Well,
it's definitely something that it needs to be, I think, looked at and addressed, which I think over any government, over the course of any government, they haven't addressed
Well-
the impact on students of the exams that they're setting.
because there are T levels that are coming in now, but those are only for very vocational subjects, not for your geographies, computings. They're more for childcare, construction, I think, are the first ones.
Yeah,
I think that
I-
I can't. I think I can't remember the other ones, but I think there are a few technology-based ones that are also coming through there, but they're very specific areas.
I think at the moment, because it's such a new thing, they are, starting off really specific, and then they'll gradually be more sort of over time. I think with the T levels, there could be a little bit more of a potential with those, partly because they have entry requirements like A levels too, which are quite high. So like your sixes and sevens in maths and English, that sort of thing. And so I think when people see that, it could mean the perception of them is a little bit more than BTECs are, even though it is equivalent. It's just the perception. There's like perception issues with it.
I've just
Yeah.
found the list of all the T levels, which might be interesting. So we have accountancy, agriculture, land management and production, animal care and management, building services, engineering, catering, craft and design, cultural heritage and visitor attractions. Interesting choice. Design and development, design, surveying and planning, digital business services, digital production, design and development, digital support and services. We have things like education, financial, hair and beauty and aesthetics, healthcare science, human resources, legal, interesting, maintenance, installation and repair, management and administration, manufacturing, processing and control, media, broadcast and production, on-site construction, and last but not least, science.
But in terms of like law, you said legal, because you could do law as an A level, or you could do legal as a T level.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting. And then you said science at the end for A level versus T level, the comparison.
Yeah.
I think it'll be very interesting to sort of, once you get people on these courses, to see what they think of the courses and whether or not they really sort of they challenge students in the same way that A levels do, because A levels are really challenging, and I think that's the point of them. A levels are sort of there to be like, this is, you know, as soon as you've done this, you go into the world of work, or you go to uni to study a specific area in far more detail. But if they need to be seen as, you know, proper, because I think a lot of people, as soon as you take anything other than an A level, they go, oh, so you're not taking a proper subject. It's like, well, yes, I am.
Yeah. A key feature of the T levels, which I just saw, and I'm using the gov.uk website for this. One of the very foundations of it is that you have to do an industry placement.
I think that's very interesting, because if you can get people on those courses, and, you know, if you excel in industry placement, then that, you know, company that you do the placement with, if it is it a placement year or a placement, you know,
You
couple
have
of months,
to do a
or...
minimum of 315 hours.
Okay,
So about 45 days.
So it's a few.
Yeah.
And so if you know, if you really excel there, they could start, combining T levels with sort of more apprenticeship style schemes, for it to be really a sort of building block into the workplace, rather than what A levels are, which is a sort of, you get the subjects and then you sort of mold them and then go, okay, well, I can do this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
If you then go, okay, well, I've got these A levels, or I've got, I could go do a T level, or you do a T level and you go, okay, that's what I want to do. That can then easily sort of, you get a pathway into the workplace. It's far easier, and you can get far more people in secure jobs, sort of for the future.
Yeah, certainly.
Because I think that's possibly one of the most sort of, I think that's what causes a lot of anxiety for students, is sort of, am I going to be able to get a job?